It's one of the most astonishing stories of the Second World War. As Nazi forces crushed all who opposed them, a small group of geniuses based in a British country house fought back, and the codebreakers won. The most famous of all was Alan Turing, whose story, told in the Oscar-winning movie The Imitation Game, has gripped the world. But there's one name that was left out of the film and largely forgotten. A code breaker who should be as famous as Turing himself. His name is Gordon Welshman. Without him, the Nazi codes might never have been broken. The war could have lasted 2 more years, and tens of thousands would have died.
When I was a child, there was always in the family the sense that Dad had done something quite important during the war. But of course, we didn't really know the details, and it couldn't really be talked about.
His achievements didn't end with World War II. He would move to the United States, where he'd play a critical role in the Cold War and change the face of the modern battlefield. With Edward Snowden's revelations of total global surveillance, we have now discovered Welshman's legacy continues to this day. But when Gordon Welshman chose to come out of the shadows and reveal his secrets, the dark world of espionage to which he had given so much ruined him. September 1939. As Britain declared war on Nazi Germany, an extraordinary motley army was being assembled at Bletchley Park in the English countryside near London to fight a secret war. Their mission was to crack one of the hardest codes ever devised, created on a machine called Enigma. Enigma lay at the heart of Hitler's armed forces communications system. Bletchley Park staff consisted of chess masters, crossword addicts, and bridge fanatics. If they could break into Enigma, they might just save the world from the Nazis. The best and the brightest were being recruited from Britain's top universities. 2 of this elite were the renowned mathematician Alan Turing and the dean of a Cambridge college, Gordon Welshman.
Gordon Welshman was actually quite glamorous. He was good-looking, and he knew he was good-looking. He had a way with the ladies. He was fantastically bright, very pugnacious, obviously a very proud man.
He did mountain climbing, he did sailing, he loved dancing.
Here's a man who'd clearly been watching Hollywood movies. He was kind of Errol Flynn and Robert Donat. It's very much that kind of dashing young chap kind of feel to him, as opposed to the shambling absent-mindedness of many of his colleagues.
Welshman was one of the original elite codebreakers, given the Herculean task of decoding the Enigma machine. Enigma used a combination of rotors, plugs, and wiring to put German messages into secret code. There were 1 in 159 million possible combinations. Breaking it looked impossible. While others sought to crack the codes, Welshman took a different approach. Instead, he focused on what would come to be known as traffic analysis. The body of the message was unreadable, but the first few letters and numbers were not in code. This was the call sign, the address, identifying who the message was to and from. There was crucial information in the call signs, and Welshman started to track it, linking up who was sending and receiving the messages, where they were, where they went. It was a brilliantly simple observation, yet it would prove crucial.
They call it chat that comes over the air. And by this means, we can build up a picture of a German unit of the Air Force, for example, the headquarters, any outstations it has, and how they keep in touch with each other and send messages.
We were dealing with an entire communication system that would serve the needs of the German forces. The call signs came alive as representing those forces, whose commanders would have to send messages to each other.
Just using traffic analysis, Welshman started to reveal the precise enemy forces that faced the Allies. Modern code breaking was born.
And they had a big wall map, and you could visually see the whole setup of the German communication system.
Traffic analysis was Bletchley's first major breakthrough.
Without an analysis of traffic, you would never have been able to use cryptography to win the war.
When you hear phrases like traffic analysis or signals intelligence, it doesn't immediately sound quite so glamorous, really. And I think possibly that's one of the reasons why Gordon Welshman hasn't been recognised so much. But if people knew just how absolutely he was the kind of spine of the entire Bletchley Park operation, then they would look at him in a completely new way.
The Enigma codes had still not been broken, but Welshman now knew the exact position and strength of thousands of German troops and hundreds of aircraft. It made him realize that Bletchley Park could become as forceful a part of Britain's defenses as the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Their weapon would be intelligence.
No one else seemed to be doing anything about this potential gold mine. So I drew up a comprehensive plan, which called for the close coordination of radio interception, analysis of the intercepted traffic, breaking Enigma keys, decoding messages on the broken keys, and extracting intelligence from the decodes.
It was the end of 1939, before open warfare between Britain and Germany had begun. Welshman was pushing for a total reorganization of Bletchley Park, a radical plan that would require far more people and resources than a collection of crossword fanatics and professors solving puzzles. Welshman went to his boss.
He won high-level approval for my plan, and we were able to start recruiting the high-quality staff that would be needed.
Welshman created what was called Hut 6, a modest name that belied the magnitude of just what was achieved within its walls.
We had 2 or 3 or 4 little lights hanging on wires from the ceiling, and we had collapsible chairs and tables. It really wasn't for a high-powered government machine.
I was a bit of a romantic, and I thought, well, you know, I might get involved in some clandestine operations.
Here, brilliant people made breakthroughs that helped change the course of the war. All were sworn to the utmost secrecy. Welshman would remain head of Hut 6 until 1943. In May 1940, Hitler's panzers invaded France. And Bletchley Park at last found a way to read some Enigma messages. The intelligence they contained was codenamed Ultra, and it made for horrifying reading. The Nazis were driving Allied forces back towards the English Channel. British, French, and Belgian troops were fighting desperately. 30 years after the war, in the only filmed interview Welshman ever gave, he revealed how Ultra had saved thousands of British lives.
In the Battle of France, probably the most important thing which came out of Ultra was that it was realized so early that we were in a hopeless position.
Hut 6 had been established just in time. Bletchley Park had revealed the troops in France were surrounded. They needed to escape now. The evacuation of Dunkirk began.
And it was decided to get out as quick as we could. And this meant that there was time to organize.
Hut 6 had saved nearly 340,000 lives and prevented the annihilation of the British Army. Its success was a testament to Welshman's steely-eyed vision.
Well, I think he was the right person at the right time. I think he probably had a lot of personal characteristics that were really vital for his work here.
For Bletchley Park and Gordon Welshman, it was just the beginning. By the end of 1940, Hut 6 under Gordon Welshman was at the heart of the whole Bletchley Park operation. Here, they used traffic analysis to select and target particular German radio networks and operators. Their traffic was then intercepted and decoded thanks to a remarkable new electromechanical device designed by Alan Turing. It was helping to break key Enigma signals on a daily basis. It was called the bomb. It simulated all the possible configurations of the Enigma machine. The bomb could check them hundreds of times faster than the smartest human. But it was very limited. To run a test, known as a bomb run, it needed to compare a short phrase from the code with what the codebreakers guessed might be the original message. For example, many German messages might begin with the words Heil Hitler. This guessed text was known as a crib. If they were right in their guess, the bomb could start cracking the code. But they needed accurate cribs. Welshman realized the German operators were only human. Like anyone else, they would fall into bad habits. And if they could target these habits, Bletchley might have a shortcut to break the codes.
What Welshman discovered was that by understanding the way that the Germans used the communications, you could start to predict more easily where particular types of message would come.
There was a German commander in Brittany somewhere who, during the war, regularly sent in every morning a message saying, Alles in Ordnung, everything's okay here. It was the same phrase he used every morning, which was a godsend to the decryptors in Hut 6.
Armed with a crib, the Bletchley team could now start a bomb run and hope to find the Enigma settings. But it was a race against time. German codes were changed at midnight, and the bomb might take days to find an answer. Even if they cracked the code, it could be too late to help the Allies. Welshman's genius was to come up with a modification of Alan Turing's brilliant design and make it work many times faster.
It's Gordon Welshman who spots the one thing that the machines need that could give them an almost uncanny elegance and beauty in the way that they worked.
Welshman came up with an inspired, improvised solution. It was called the diagonal board. A simple electrical circuit enabled the bomb to cross-check hundreds of possible combinations at the same time. It reduced bomb runs from days down to hours or even minutes. Hut 6 could now read German messages, sometimes before they were even read by the intended enemy recipient.
So here we see an example of Gordon Welshman's fantastic mathematical intelligence coming through, easily a match for that of Alan Turing.
By 1941, Bletchley's decodes were starting to change the course of the war. A German battleship, the Bismarck, was scouring the Atlantic, destroying British shipping and threatening the nation's survival.
The main part of our fleet was out pursuing the Bismarck. She was the latest German ship and the best thing they'd got in the Navy, and very important.
On May 24th, 1941, the Bismarck sank the pride of the British Navy, HMS Hood, Britain's most modern and biggest battlecruiser. 1,400 British sailors lost their lives. Only 3 of its crews survived. Winston Churchill ordered the Royal Navy to find and destroy the Bismarck, but they had no way of knowing where it was. At Bletchley, Welshman's team believed they might be able to use intelligence to find it. Sifting through the entirety of German naval communications for any reference to the Bismarck was a daunting challenge.
What I had to do was to take the Enigma telegrams as they arrived in Hut 6, and I had to put them into the machine. Then I had to look at them and see whether they were all in German, of course, see whether they appeared to be of any interest.
Then the breakthrough they had been hoping for.
We discovered this message from a German commander to the commander of the Bismarck saying, "Where are you going? I'm worried about my son who's on board." And the message came back, which I got, which said Brest.
At last, they had a location. The Bismarck was heading for the port of Brest in northern France, being used by the German Navy. A powerful Royal Navy battle group of 13 vessels was ordered to hunt down the Bismarck.
In this, perhaps the most dramatic naval film ever taken, you will see salvos from the Bismarck failing to hit one of our battleships. This was during the chase right across the Atlantic, while the Nazi ship was running from the guns of our squadron.
A torpedo dropped from a British biplane disabled the Bismarck. The British warships closed in.
We were all absolutely on our toes, wondering what was going to come through next, because we knew it was one of the major battles of the war.
When these pictures were taken during the action, the Bismarck was nearing her end.
Hut 6 had the satisfaction of decoding the very last message sent from the stricken Bismarck. Ship unmanageable. We shall fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer.
And eventually they sank her.
This flagship of Hitler's Navy went down with over 2,000 of its crew.
I mean, that was a day to remember. We were constructing a jigsaw, but half the pieces were missing. Now, it all made a picture and all the jigsaw came together. We were invigorated immediately.
It was Britain's first significant victory in the darkest days of World War II. Bletchley Park had proved that intelligence could sink ships. It was a weapon the Allies were determined to use to the limit. Under Welshman's supervision, a ramshackle collection of wooden huts became the world's first intelligence factory. Rebuilt in brick on a whole new scale. A handful of codebreakers became thousands working around the clock. 2 bombs became 200. Bletchley Park was breaking Enigma daily, revealing the inner secrets of the German war machine, and it was changing the course of the war. They tapped into Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's battle plans, and his forces were driven out of North Africa. They located the U-boat wolf packs lurking in the Atlantic, and they were hunted down. And thanks to Bletchley, the Allies knew their D-Day deception had worked. Hitler believed the real invasion was yet to come and held back the panzers that might have driven the Allies into the sea. For the very first time, code breaking had made a significant difference to a war. Bletchley is credited with hastening the Nazi defeat by 2 years. That's enough to have saved thousands or hundreds of thousands of lives. By the time the war ended in 1945, Bletchley Park had transformed military intelligence. The brains at Bletchley had taken on the brawn of the Teutonic Army and won. And Welshman was at the heart of it.
To think of him as the Henry Ford of cryptography is not a bad metaphor. The industrialization of cryptography. That's an astonishing achievement.
His legacy is in what Bletchley Park achieved, what Bletchley Park contributed to the success and the Allied victory in 1945. It's hard to have a bigger legacy than that.
One war was over, but another was about to start. It would see a remarkable contribution from Gordon Welshman, but at a devastating personal cost. After the end of the Second World War, the legacy of the work of Bletchley Park and Hut 6 would endure. Gordon Welshman's creation would find itself the model for the National Security Agency, the NSA, and its British equivalent, GCHQ. The future lay in computers, and while Bletchley had once led the world, Welshman now believed bankrupt Britain was squandering its technological lead.
You also have a sense of a man who understands very, very well about the computer revolution, the computer age that's about to come into being, because this is a computer age that's brought into being at Bletchley Park.
Welshman was determined to stay at the forefront of the computer revolution. That meant America.
The Massachusetts Institute of Technology was asked by the 3 military services to establish a new research center.
This new center, called MITRE, was created to develop top-secret defense technologies, and they were recruiting the finest brains.
I imagine that the powers that be in England got in touch with powers that be in the United States and said they had this wonderful guy and he would like a job.
Working here put Gordon Welshman right back at the heart of another intelligence war, the Cold War.
One of the most dangerous threats to our nation's security is the possibility of attack by high-speed enemy bombers armed with nuclear weapons.
This was secret conflict on a global scale. Huge strides in technology were needed to hold the so-called Red Menace at bay.
During that period was the Cuban Missile Crisis, okay? I mean, that was really a tough period, okay? I built a bomb shelter in my basement in Bedford, Massachusetts.
A large-scale nuclear attack on the United States could produce a patchwork pattern of fallout covering 2/3 of the nation.
We cannot afford to take that chance.
Welshman was given the highest civilian security clearance. It meant becoming a U.S. citizen.
The job did require a very high security clearance. In fact, it was high enough so that the fact that I had it was classified.
With the frightening prospect of a nuclear confrontation, Welshman was given the vital task of ensuring U.S. military communications were capable of withstanding attack. All he had learned at Bletchley Park was now applied to help achieve American supremacy on a scale that would dwarf Hut 6.
Traffic analysis in World War II led Welshman to understand the way information flowed in battle and how many different ways it flowed.
Welshman realized military communications hadn't really moved on since his days at Bletchley. Headquarters issued an order, units made reports. But in modern warfare, instant access to battlefield information was essential.
Repeat, this is a yellow alert.
And computer technology was advancing fast enough to make this possible.
He said, hey, with this digital communications, we can do some things that we've never been able to do before.
Welshman used all his experience to develop a completely new kind of network. Information on the battlefield was constantly updated, immediately shared, and totally secure.
Everybody periodically broadcast bits of information about where they were, what they were doing.
Welshman called his idea a horseshoe, but we would all recognize it today as the cloud. Welshman's system instantly connected planes, submarines, ground forces, battleships, all the elements of the command structure, all at the same time.
And that went out into the sky. And anybody who was interested in knowing what friendly aircraft are in this area could immediately get those reports. Sort of like an instant Google. And this was 3-4 decades before Google.
Gordon came up with this radical idea, and people looked at it and said, hey, that's pretty good. And so, you know, my boss called me in and said, okay, make it work.
His ideas were really a game changer. They changed the way people thought about command and control, and they changed the way battles were managed and warfare was fought. It's still in use today, and it will be for a long time.
The legacy of the two giants of Bletchley Park endures to the present day. Alan Turing had made a decisive contribution to the computer revolution. Gordon Welshman's work anticipated how the internet and the cloud would later develop, and how technology would enable a surveillance society. In 1971, Welshman moved to the New England town of Newburyport and married his third wife, Teenie. He was now 65 and still at the peak of his powers. He had made a decisive impact on both the Second World War and now the Cold War. Yet everything he had achieved was known only within his clandestine world. Fighting an intelligence war against the Soviet Union, the US and British governments had kept the success of Bletchley Park secret for 2 decades. Everyone who worked there had been sworn to silence. But then in 1974, came an event that had unexpectedly far-reaching consequences. The Ultra Secret, a government-approved book by an ex-MI6 officer, revealed for the first time the role of code-breaking in winning the Second World War. Suddenly, daylight was being let in on a hitherto secret world. It was a shocking moment for all those like Welshman, who had taken their oath of secrecy so seriously.
For years and years, I didn't even read the histories of the war because I was afraid that somehow or other I might reveal something that I'd learned from Ultra.
I think it was an enormous relief. He could tell these stories and could talk to us and could share memories that he kept tamped down for so long.
An idea began to form in Welshman's mind that he should write his story.
I seem to have a very special responsibility in that I was the only person alive with inside knowledge of a very telling episode in cryptologic history.
In 1977, he also took the deliberate decision to appear on the BBC series The Secret War, which dared to reveal the still classified story of ultra intelligence.
I don't know whether I should say this, but it seems to me that some of the things really have been kept secret too long, that there is a point at which you do more damage by deceiving your own people about the true history of World War II than you could possibly do by telling now the stories as it actually happened.
Determined to set the record straight, as well as to give public recognition to those whose work had been war-winning, Welshman had to write from his own prodigious memory and discreet research from former colleagues. He had no access to official papers, which were still classified. It was 7 years' work.
I think my father felt that he had a very important insight on a particular piece of history, which very few other people had. And he just kept reading the obituaries and realizing that there were fewer and fewer people left.
But Gordon Welshman, after a life spent in the secret world, didn't realize that world was about to turn on him. Gordon Welshman's book, The Hut 6 Story, was published in the United States in February 1982 and in the UK the following May. For the first time in print, an insider's account of the full secret history of code-breaking's role in World War II was laid bare. Importantly, it incorporated Welshman's use of traffic analysis. The book also included a warning. Welshman believed lessons from the war were being ignored. The Americans were making the very same mistakes with their security that the Germans had once made.
He thought he could talk about this in a way that would reach the general public, that would not disclose any secrets, it would not tell tales you shouldn't. He hoped it would make some money, but he really hoped it would generate a conversation.
The secret world didn't wait long to hit back.
I was on my way to work, and this car speeded up and stopped right smack almost in the middle of the road. Nobody stops there, so I had to see what was going on. There's Gordon's house right there, and the two men jumped out wearing black suit, black tie, and black sunglasses. They looked like the Men in Black, and they raced across the street. Gordon answered the door, and you could see them, you know, busily discussing something. And all of a sudden, Gordon took the door and he slammed it almost in their faces. Later, I found out that it was a national security agency.
There had been books about the ultra-secret prior to his publication. There was no putting the toothpaste back in the tube. The secret was out. But Welshman's book was the first about cryptanalysis by an actual insider who had done it.
It was still the height of the Cold War.
If our continent were attacked, this red telephone would be lifted from its cradle, and instantly, the United States would launch the greatest counterattack in history.
Signals intelligence remained at that time at the very heart of the intelligence conflict that was being conducted during the Cold War. So this was as important and as secret as it could get.
I think that people who saw what he wrote felt he was imperiling current operations.
Welshman's World War II work in traffic analysis might have been 40 years earlier, but what he had discovered was still so vital to the secret world that revealing it, even now, was considered dangerous. On February 22, 1982, the men in dark glasses returned.
These two young gentlemen came in, one from NSA and one from, I believe it was Air Force Intelligence. They said, well, this information has never been declassified, and therefore is still in violation of the wartime secrets laws. Gordon was taken aback. He said, this is absurd. They were delivering a message to him, and it was an ominous message.
I believe they had conversations with Mr. Welshman. Beyond that, I'm not sure that I can talk about anything meaningful.
And it became clear the American authorities were not going to back off. It was really quite devastating. He was quite unprepared for that.
Welshman enlisted the help of another writer, who had fallen afoul of the NSA.
We lived in the same area, so we could actually get together physically. And it's probably the kind of things that you don't want to talk over the telephone, especially when you're dealing with NSA. He couldn't do any publicity. He couldn't answer questions from reporters. He couldn't appear on television shows and so forth. And that was a really big problem.
The NSA threatened Welshman with an obscure legal clause dealing with the sharing of cryptology. This same law is now being used on NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden.
It's a part of the Espionage Act. I think it's 10 years in prison and a heavy fine. So these were very, very serious charges. I could see he was nervous. I could see the physical effects that the NSA was having on him. That devastates somebody that spent their entire life trying to protect U.S. and British governments, and now they're being told that they're going to be charged with a crime, possibly, of giving secrets to the enemy. He'll be prosecuted as maybe being a spy, or not a spy, but a leaker.
There was one final act with devastating consequences. On April 29, 1982, Welshman's security clearance was withdrawn.
All of a sudden, he disappeared.
Dear Mr. Welshman, the MITRE Corporation believes it would be mutually beneficial to temporarily suspend your access to classified materials. This suspension is effective this date. Please acknowledge receipt of this letter by signing in the space provided below. And he signed below.
Rather than stay silent, Welshman went on the offensive, writing letters and articles which he hoped would exonerate him, including a recently discovered unpublished paper, Ultra Revisited, a tale of two contributors.
The stories of Alan Turing's life and mine have two things in common. First, we were regarded by our boss as the two greatest contributors to the wartime success of Bletchley Park. Second, we have been branded as security risks. What has happened to me can be compared with what happened to Turing.
For many in the intelligence community, Welshman was being naive to imagine he could reveal the secrets of Hut 6 with impunity. But he never lost his belief that this was information the public needed to know. With Welshman gagged by the security services, his book flopped. He sold only 900 copies. The rest were pulped.
He suffered a lot. He went through a great deal to put Hut 6 story out.
The strain was also coming at a very difficult time. He'd had some more medical problems.
It was a cruel irony that Gordon Welshman, a master of the clandestine world, who helped win World War II by breaking enemy codes, and also helped the West win the Cold War by keeping their communications secret, would himself fall afoul of the secret state.
I believe that the rules at the time about secrecy were really inflexible. The people who administered inflexible rules themselves had spent a full career being indoctrinated with the idea that secrecy was the base. I am today glad that the book is out.
By now, Welshman was seriously ill with cancer.
I'm not saying that he was blameless. He had broken the procedures, and the law was never invoked. But he lost his job and his livelihood without ever appearing in court or ever facing any criminal charge.
And finally, you know, I think he realized that it wasn't going to go away. They probably couldn't successfully prosecute him, but they would break him financially.
Gordon Welshman never redeemed himself. On October 8, 1985, he died.
It made 2 of the last 3 years of his life really quite hellish.
But his legacy would continue. After his death, His methods and insights not only became part of the West's military thinking, they also became the very heart of the new intelligence networks, as the world became more and more connected via computer. Only in 2013 would the significance of that legacy become clear. It's been 30 years since Gordon Welshman died, and yet the true legacy of his work is only now emerging. In June 2013, Edward Snowden leaked tens of thousands of highly classified files. Our intelligence agencies were harvesting metadata, our phone numbers, our computers' IP addresses, the websites we visit, those we message or call, and where we are at any given moment.
It suddenly occurred to me that actually what we now do with metadata is, in a sense, a highly developed version of what Welshman started with traffic analysis. That's what it is. Metadata and analytics now, in a digital world, are essentially our way of doing traffic analysis. And it can be very, very revealing.
Metadata analysis is today's version of Welshman's own traffic analysis during World War II.
One of the things that Gordon Welshman discovered was how important it is to not just to read what's in a message, but to derive intelligence by the activities of messages. How many are being sent? Where they're being sent? How many are being sent from one place to another? These are what's called the externals. Not the content, but the externals. And today, that's extremely important. Today, we call it metadata, basically. And the NSA uses this enormously.
For many, what Snowden was revealing was that we live in a surveillance state, that the NSA have turned Welshman's legacy against their own citizens, destroying our privacy. But for others, traffic analysis is keeping us safe. After 9/11, CIA analysts were on the hunt for Osama bin Laden, the most wanted man on the planet. They turned to a technique Gordon Welshman had developed so powerfully in World War II, traffic analysis, now known as metadata analysis.
If I want to understand how to destroy this terrorist organization, if I want to take them down as an organization, then I have to look for their vulnerabilities. And to look for their vulnerabilities, I have to understand their network. I found a lot of similarities in Welshman's work. I have this mass of information, and it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. And what I have to do is I have to look for patterns in that.
In an ever more connected world, with more data, more patterns, traffic analysis is only becoming more powerful as an intelligence tool.
What we call link analysis or network analysis, the more sophisticated version of that, is the absolutely critical tool in finding covert networks, whether it's terrorists or crime networks, because they're trying to hide their entire organizational structure.
With modern encryption, today's codes seem genuinely unbreakable. And so traffic analysis is all security agencies have to work with.
We were able to find out a great deal about what Al-Qaeda was doing and bin Laden by looking at the metadata, what the externals of the messages were. Where are they going? How frequently are they being sent?
It was bin Laden's courier who unwittingly led Navy SEALs to his compound, and traffic analysis that found the courier, Welshman's legacy in action. Today, Edward Snowden is branded by many a traitor for revealing the secrets of modern traffic analysis. Gordon Welshman also went public for something he truly believed in. But after a glittering career, he spent the last 3 years of his life fighting illness, fighting for his reputation, and feeling outcast from the very world he had helped to build. Alan Turing's brilliant work at Bletchley Park has made him an iconic figure in our history. His pioneering spirit sparked the computer revolution and is now part of all our lives. It was Gordon Welshman's misfortune that his equally brilliant work has not earned him the public accolades it deserves. His top-secret work impacts on every one of us as much as Turing's. But this very secrecy denies him his rightful place in our history.
.9% of the people in the world have never heard of Gordon Welchman. And you say the name Gordon Welchman and they just kind of stare back at you. And yet, he contributed so much. Shortening the war by 2 years, good heavens. Saving thousands of lives, and yet nobody knows who he is. I have no qualms about saying he was a genius.
I'm enormously proud of my grandfather. Still sometimes distressed about what happened after he published his book and how much that meant to him.
He was certainly proud of what he'd done. There's always an element that it was a pity he didn't get recognized, but it's too bad he couldn't be here today.